In the beginning, there was darkness. Then, the blinding light, four beings came into existence. In the beginning, it is said that there was nothing save for a white expanse. Then, by divine will, the four appeared and spawned all creation. These beings were called fire, water, earth, and air. Of them, water and fire were first and were the most sacred. When water first saw earth, he loved her immediately. But when earth saw water, she grew afraid. After all, as the scriptures say, it is water and fire who formed our souls. Air agreed to help water. Then she left. She couldn't wait to see what else there was to explore. But fire, giving as she was, gave so much of her flame that she nearly went out. Water and fire fought venomously. They destroyed everything. Okay guys, so hi, I'm Yasmine Pirouz. I'm a author, creator of the comic Torus Link. And if you're wondering why I have this beautiful sky as a background, it's because 1, I love the sky. 2, I'm on a field. There's a soccer ball over there somewhere. I don't know if you can see it. And 3, I'm on a location where they're probably not letting me record, so I don't actually want to record said location. So what happens when you're in a world that says you're not free to be who you are, you're not free to do what you love, you're not free to be with who you love, and you're not free to just be yourself because of how others might treat you, or because of different cases of unfairness? Many times in stories, we only ever see one perspective, the perspective of the protagonist and the one who's causing all the problems, the antagonist. But one of the sources of Torus Link is that it's a story that tells two sides, where you're not only seeing the perspective of artists, and you're not only seeing the perspective of people with fantastic elemental powers just trying to achieve their dreams, but you're seeing how these people are connected across these sides, where even though they might have literal worlds of different things going on, as they strive to be true to who they are, we, the readers, come to see just what they share. Not so much in outer appearances, but in feelings. And if you've seen my prior video, What Sets Us Up, as well as my intro into Torus Link, if you haven't seen that, go see it now. Torus Link for me is not just a story. I see that there are parallels between people in real life too, no matter the outer differences. But because we often do see stories that are only one single perspective, it's very rare that we get to see what the other side is saying, the side that we might see as the antagonist. And when we're so stuck in this position, we tend to fail to see how bridging with the other side might actually help us resolve our problems.
Hello. So my thoughts on how transgender people, one of the arguments that we always see in the media is that a lot of transgender people say that they should be viewed and by society by the identity that they feel on the inside. That if it's a man who identifies as a woman on the inside, or a woman who identifies as a man on the inside, that they should only be identified by the society at large as the way they feel on the inside. And my belief is that if they aren't going to advocate for everyone to have that same privilege, then I just don't really understand why a transgender person should get that same privilege of identity when almost every other minority group their identity is defined by society, basically how society chooses to define it, no matter how they may feel on the inside. Like for example, on the inside, I may feel like a person without disabilities, but society is still going to view me as a person with disabilities no matter how I feel on the inside. And so my whole point is, or let's say, for example, that African American person may or may not identify by their racial characteristics on the inside, but to a lot of segments of society, that African American person is always going to be identified as primarily an African American person first, and sometimes only as an African American person, no matter how he or she feels on the inside. And so my point is, if the transgender community is not going to advocate for every single minority group to be evaluated by society on the same level, then I really don't see why their particular group deserves that kind of special treatment when, I mean, basically if and when they aren't going to advocate for the same thing for other minority groups as well. So my thoughts on how transgender people, one of the arguments that we always see in the media is that a lot of transgender people say that they should be viewed and by society by the identity that they feel on the inside.
Hello, my name is Justine. I am a male to female transgendered individual. What that means is that I was born with male physiology and raised with a male upbringing, but then later in life I transitioned to female physiology and more female socialization.
That if it's a man who identifies as a woman on the inside, or a woman who identifies as a man on the inside, that they should only be identified by the society at large as the way they feel on the inside.
When people ask me what it feels like to know that you're transgendered, or the general feeling of being transgendered, there is a lot of things to consider here. But what I want to focus on is the idea of comfort.
You know, if they aren't going to advocate for everyone to have that same privilege, then I just don't really understand why a transgender person should get that same privilege of identity when almost every other minority group their identity is defined by society, basically how society chooses to define it, no matter how they may feel on the inside.
I don't want people to think that when someone comes to the realization that they are transgendered, that this is a positive formula on the comfortability scale. It isn't that you're at 0, you're comfortable, but you would be more comfortable if you were a boy, or you would be more comfortable if you were a girl, gaining positive comfortability, being really psyched about yourself. It's not like that. It's that you are uncomfortable. You're in the negative numbers. You're not anywhere close to being at 0, just neutral comfortability.
Like, for example, on the inside, I may feel like a person without disabilities, but society is still going to view me as a person with disabilities no matter how I feel on the inside.
Then you start to realize that there's something that's just a little bit wrong about you. And it's not anything that's coming from an outside source. You know that there's nothing intrinsically wrong with you as a person. This is very important. There are many situations that we can put ourselves in or that happen to us that make us uncomfortable. But for the most part, those situations are from outside social pressures.
Or let's say, for example, that African American person may or may not identify by their racial characteristics on the inside, but to a lot of segments of society, that African American person is always going to be identified as primarily an African American person first, and sometimes only as an African American person, no matter how he or she feels on the inside.
Let's say being Hispanic. There's nothing wrong with that. You don't have a creeping sensation in the back of your mind that there's something different about you. And while people may, particularly down here in the South, choose to make you feel uncomfortable because of the color of your skin, there's nothing intrinsically wrong with that. But that's why I say that those are external sources of discomfort. Here's the important part.
As a person living with a disability called cerebral palsy, the one thing that I wish people without disabilities, mine included or any disability.
So what I just really want everyone to know, and the way I would want other people to look at people who are transgendered, is
to know about living with a disability is that
at least to me, thinking about being
with
transgender.
disabilities just want to be given a chance, to be given the opportunity to prove.
No, you're just trying to get back up from the negative numbers. You're just trying to get to zero. And that's really hard.
That they can contribute to society just as much as a person living without disabilities.
It's not that they want to be a boy, or it's not that they want to be a girl.
People with disabilities may require accommodations and patience depending on the nature of their disability, how it affects their day-to-day life.
It's that they know that they're not the thing that they currently are, that they have not transitioned into.
We just want to just be seen as people and not to be seen as our diagnoses.
And that negative amount of discomfort is very disturbing. And it doesn't come from the outside. It comes from the inside.
Just be seen as people and not to be seen as our diagnoses.
And that negative amount of discomfort is very disturbing.
Listening to the perspective of Justine, a identified transgender person, helped me to find the answer to the point that I had been making when in her video she pointed out that people who are a Hispanic often face external pressures similar to the ones faced by transgendered individuals, and that the implication was that they should be judged by how they feel on the inside, which helped me to realize that people within the transgendered community do advocate for other minority groups to receive the same consideration, that they should be treated the way that they feel on the inside, and to helping me to broaden my understanding of the reality that transgender people can be allies to other minority groups, and that they are. I originally heard that particular viewpoint in a sketch in which Mr. had argued that a lot of what as he understood the transgender community was trying to express seemed to reflect a sense of privilege. He expressed a viewpoint that I at first had agreed with, and that informed my perspective when I spoke in the first video interview. And a lot of that comes from me not knowing very many transgender people, not having transgender friends, and so a lot of what I said was actually informed by that lack of knowledge about that particular community.
So when I gathered the responses that I did, I made the choice to ask each person to share this perspective without realizing what the other person would say, or even knowing anything about the other person that they'd be compared to at all. The reason I framed it this way and just allowed each person to express what they were without directly responding to one another is to get the chance to put out their own perspective about themselves, not in any kind of perception of being attacked by anybody. And If you're reflecting your perspective of where you're coming from, simply expressing yourselves, what you need, what's making you unhappy, and what you'd like others to recognize of your needs. In that situation, is anyone really an antagonist? Special thanks to Christin Menendez of Virtuous, Heality for helping to support this episode. Christin is a relationship coach who specializes in healing past trauma so that we can define our own narratives, take power back, and release the resentment that comes from keeping an antagonist image of those that might have hurt us in the past. Link to her sites and how you can schedule online sessions with her below.